Clara Morrow had lived alone in her grandmother's house for 6 years. The house sat on a quiet street in a small college town, surrounded by tall oak trees and the kind of silence that only comes from decades of undisturbed living. After her grandmother passed away, Clara inherited everything. The furniture, the photographs, the old dishes in the kitchen cabinets, and the heavy responsibility of maintaining a home that was built in 1923. She was 34 years old, worked as a graphic designer for a small marketing firm, and had long ago accepted that her life would be quiet and predictable. She liked it that way. But the house was too big for one person, and the property taxes kept rising every year. So Clara made a decision she had hoped to avoid. She would rent out the basement room. It was a small space, previously used as a storage area, but it had its own entrance, a private bathroom, and a window that looked out onto the backyard. She posted an advertisement online and waited. Within a week, she had a response. The young man who showed up at her door was polite, soft-spoken, and neatly dressed. His name was David. He was a medical student at the university, he explained, and he needed a quiet place to study. He had no pets, no girlfriend, no late-night parties. He just wanted a room where he could sleep and keep his books. Clara showed him the basement. He nodded at everything, asked a few practical questions about laundry and utilities, and then handed her a deposit in cash. He moved in 3 days later with 2 suitcases and a box of textbooks. Clara thought she had found the perfect tenant. This is a work of fiction. Names, characters, places, and incidents are products of the author's imagination or are used fictitiously. For the first 2 months, David was exactly as he had promised. He left early in the morning and returned late at night. Clara rarely saw him, and when they did cross paths, he was always polite. He paid his rent on time, in cash, every single month. He never complained about anything. He never had guests. He never made noise. He was, by any measure, the ideal tenant. Clara stopped thinking about him entirely. He was just a quiet presence in the basement, as unnoticed as the furnace or the water heater. But then came the night of the storm. It was a Thursday in late October, and rain was pounding against the windows. Clara was in the living room, watching television, when she heard a strange sound from downstairs. It was not loud, but it was persistent. A dripping sound. She remembered that the basement had a small storage room near the furnace, and that the roof above it had leaked once before, years ago, when her grandmother was still alive. She grabbed a flashlight and headed down the stairs. The basement was dark. David's door was closed, but she could see a thin line of light underneath it. He was home, then. She walked past his door toward the storage area, the flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The dripping sound was coming from the corner, near the old wooden shelves. She aimed the light upward and saw a small stain spreading across the ceiling. She would need to call a roofer in the morning. As she turned to leave, her flashlight swept across the storage shelves. And then she stopped. Behind a stack of old boxes, pushed into the corner as if hidden, there was a notebook. Clara knew she should not look. The notebook was not hers. It belonged to David, and whatever was inside it was his private business. But something made her hesitate. Perhaps it was the way the notebook was hidden, tucked away where no one would accidentally find it. Perhaps it was the storm outside, making everything feel strange and unsettled. Perhaps it was simply curiosity, that old human weakness that has caused so much trouble throughout history. She reached out and pulled the notebook from its hiding place. It was a simple black composition book, the kind students buy for $1 at the beginning of the semester. She opened it. The pages were filled with handwriting. Small, neat, meticulous handwriting. Names. Dates. Times. Locations. It looked like a diary at first, but as Clara read further, she realized it was something else entirely. Page after page of observations about people. Women, mostly. Their routines. Where they worked. What time they left their homes. Who visited them. What they wore. One entry read, Subject 17. Leaves for work at 7:45 a.m. Returns between 5:30 and 6:15 p.m. Usually alone. Grocery shopping on Wednesdays. Uses the self-checkout. Takes the bus on rainy days. Clara's hands began to tremble. She turned to another page. Subject 22. Works at the coffee shop on Main Street. Morning shift, Tuesday through Saturday. Lives alone. Has a cat. No visitors in 3 weeks of observation. She closed the notebook and stood there in the darkness, her heart pounding in her chest. This was not a diary. This was something else. Something wrong. Clara shoved the notebook back into its hiding place and hurried upstairs. She locked her door, something she had never done before, and sat on her bed, trying to calm her breathing. It could be nothing, she told herself. Maybe David was a writer. Maybe he was researching a book. Maybe he was a journalist working on a story. There were explanations. There had to be explanations. She did not sleep well that night. The next morning, she went to work as usual, but she could not concentrate. She kept thinking about those names, those dates, those meticulous observations. When she came home that evening, she saw David's light on in the basement. He was there, just a few feet below her, going about his business. She forced herself to act normal. She made dinner, watched television, went to bed. But the notebook haunted her. On Saturday morning, Clara was scrolling through the local news on her phone when a headline made her stop. Local woman missing since Wednesday. She clicked on the article and read. A woman named Rachel Moore, 32 years old, had disappeared 3 days ago. She had last been seen leaving her apartment building on Wednesday morning. Police were asking anyone with information to come forward. Clara stared at the photograph. And then she remembered. Subject 22. The woman from the coffee shop. The one who lived alone, had a cat, and had been observed for 3 weeks. Clara grabbed her phone and scrolled back through her memory. Subject 22's name had not been written in the notebook. Only numbers. But the description matched perfectly. The coffee shop on Main Street. The morning shifts. The cat. The solitude. Clara felt the floor drop beneath her. She spent the rest of that day in a state of paralysis. Part of her wanted to call the police immediately. But what would she say? My tenant has a notebook with observations about people, and one of them might be a missing woman? It was not evidence. It was not even suspicion. It was just a feeling. And feelings were not enough. She decided to wait. To watch. To learn more. Over the next week, Clara became an observer herself. She paid attention to David's habits in a way she never had before. She noticed things. He always carried 2 phones. One he used openly, a regular smartphone. The other was smaller, older, and he kept it hidden in his pocket, checking it only when he thought no one was looking. He never received mail. No letters, no packages, no bills. When Clara asked him once if he wanted her to forward anything that came for him, he smiled and said, "I handle everything online." His smile was pleasant, but it did not reach his eyes. She also noticed his hours. He claimed to be a medical student, but he was never home during the day studying. He left early and returned late, but his schedule was erratic. Some nights he came home at 10. Other nights it was after midnight. Once, she heard him leave at 3 in the morning and return just before dawn. What kind of medical student kept those hours? Clara began to feel watched in her own home. Every creak of the floorboards, every shadow in the corner of her eye, made her jump. She was living with a stranger, and she was beginning to suspect that stranger was dangerous. On the following Tuesday, Clara came home from work to find David in the backyard. He was standing near the fence, looking at something on his phone. When he heard her car, he looked up and waved. It was a friendly gesture, perfectly normal. But Clara noticed something that made her blood run cold. He was standing directly beneath her bedroom window. The window she always left open a crack at night, even in the cold weather, because she liked the fresh air. She went inside and climbed the stairs to her room. She looked out the window. From that angle, she could see exactly where David had been standing. He would have had a clear view of her room if the lights were on at night. She closed the window and locked it. That evening, she started keeping a notebook of her own. She wrote down everything she had observed. The multiple phones. The erratic hours. The notebook in the basement. The missing woman from the coffee shop. She wrote down dates and times and details. She wrote down the way David looked at her sometimes, a little too long, a little too carefully. She wrote down the questions he had started asking her recently. Innocent questions, on the surface. What time do you usually go to bed? Do you work from home sometimes? Do you have any family nearby? She had answered them all without thinking, because he was just a tenant making conversation. But now, looking at the words written on the page, they did not seem innocent at all. Clara decided to do some research of her own. She started with the university. She called the medical school admissions office and asked if they had a student named David. She gave his full name and described him. The woman on the phone was helpful but apologetic. "I'm sorry, we can't give out information about students for privacy reasons." Clara understood. But she tried a different approach. She called back the next day and asked to speak with someone in student housing. She pretended to be a landlord verifying a tenant's enrollment. The man who answered was friendly and checked his records. After a moment, he said, "I don't show anyone by that name in our system." But that doesn't necessarily mean anything. Some students live off campus and we don't track them. Clara thanked him and hung up. It was not proof. But it was another piece of the puzzle. The next step was the previous landlord. David had provided a reference when he applied for the room, a man named Gerald Porter. Clara had called him at the time, and he had said David was a great tenant, quiet and reliable. Now she called again, using a different phone number so he would not recognize hers. She pretended to be a potential employer doing a background check. "I'm calling about David," she said. "He listed you as a reference." There was a pause. Then the man said, "David who?" Clara gave the full name. Another pause. "I don't know anyone by that name," the man said. "You must have the wrong number." And he hung up. Clara sat in her living room, staring at the phone in her hand. The reference was fake. The landlord she had spoken to initially was either lying or had been impersonated, which meant David had gone to considerable trouble to create a false identity. Why would a medical student need to do that? She thought about going to the police, but she still had nothing concrete. A fake reference was suspicious, but it was not a crime. People lied on rental applications all the time. She needed more. She needed to see that notebook again. The opportunity came 3 nights later. Clara was reading in bed when she heard David's car leave. She waited 10 minutes to be sure, then grabbed her flashlight and went downstairs. The basement was dark and cold. She went straight to the storage area and reached behind the boxes. The notebook was still there. She pulled it out and opened it. This time, she read more carefully. The entries were organized by number. Subject 1 through Subject 23. Subject 22 was the missing woman from the coffee shop. Clara read every word about her. The observations had stopped on the day she disappeared. But there were other subjects. Subject 18. Subject 19. Subject 20. All women. All with detailed routines, habits, vulnerabilities. And at the back of the notebook, a new section had been started. Subject 24. Clara read the first entry and felt her stomach turn to ice. Subject 24. Lives alone in a 2-story house on Elm Street. Works as a graphic designer. Leaves for work at 8:15 a.m. Returns between 5:30 and 6 p.m. Bedroom window faces the backyard. Leaves it open at night. No security system. No family nearby. Subject 24 was her. Clara closed the notebook and put it back exactly where she had found it. She walked upstairs on shaking legs, locked her door, and sat on the floor with her back against the wall. She was being watched. She was being studied. She was a subject in his notebook. And Subject 22 had disappeared. She did not sleep that night. She sat in the darkness, listening to every sound, jumping at every creak. When dawn finally came, she made a decision. She would leave. She would pack a bag and go to a hotel, and from there she would figure out what to do. She was pulling clothes from her closet when she heard a knock at her door. "Clara?" It was David's voice. Polite. Concerned. "Are you okay? I heard you moving around all night." She froze. "I'm fine," she called out. "Just couldn't sleep." There was a pause. Then he said, "Can I come in? I wanted to talk to you about something." Clara looked around the room. Her half-packed bag was on the bed. If he saw that, he would know. "Give me a minute," she said. She shoved the bag under the bed and opened the door. David stood there, smiling. He was holding a small box. "I brought you some cookies," he said. "My mother sent them. I thought you might like some." It was such a normal gesture. Such a kind gesture. Clara took the box and thanked him. He lingered for a moment, his eyes moving past her into the room. Then he smiled again and walked away. Clara closed the door and leaned against it. The cookies were probably fine. Probably. But she could not eat them. She could not trust anything he gave her. That afternoon, Clara went to the police. She sat in a small interview room and told a detective everything. The notebook. The fake reference. The missing woman. The observations about her own life. The detective, a woman named Sarah Chen, listened without interrupting. When Clara finished, Detective Chen was quiet for a long moment. "Do you have the notebook?" she asked. "No. I left it there. I was afraid he would notice if I took it." "Can you describe it?" Clara did. The detective took notes. "And the missing woman, Rachel Moore. You're sure the description in the notebook matched her?" "As sure as I can be. The coffee shop, the schedule, the cat. It was her." Detective Chen nodded slowly. "I'll be honest with you. This is thin. A notebook with observations isn't evidence of a crime. People keep journals. People watch. It's not illegal. But the fake reference, suspicious, yes. But not proof of anything. We'll look into it. We'll check his identity, see if anything comes up. But I can't get a warrant based on what you've told me." Clara felt her hopes crumble. "What do I do in the meantime?" "You go home. You act normal. And you call me immediately if anything changes. If he does anything threatening, if you feel unsafe, call 911. Clara walked out of the police station feeling more alone than ever. She had told the truth, and the truth was not enough. She went back to the house because she had nowhere else to go. She could not afford a hotel indefinitely, and she could not abandon her home. But everything felt different now. The walls seemed thinner. The shadows seemed deeper. She started sleeping with a knife under her pillow. She stopped leaving her bedroom window open. She checked her locks constantly, sometimes 3 or 4 times before bed. David continued his routine. He came and went at strange hours. He smiled and waved. He asked polite questions. But now Clara noticed the way his eyes lingered on her. The way he seemed to be always watching, always cataloging, always adding to whatever notebook he kept in his mind. On Friday night, she heard footsteps on the stairs. Not the basement stairs. The stairs to the second floor. Her stairs. She sat up in bed, her heart pounding. The footsteps stopped outside her door. She held her breath, the knife in her hand. A long moment passed. Then she heard a soft knock. "Clara?" David's voice. "Are you awake?" She did not answer. Another knock. "I heard a noise. I wanted to make sure you were okay." She still did not answer. After what felt like an eternity, she heard the footsteps retreating down the stairs. She sat there until dawn, her eyes fixed on the door, the knife never leaving her hand. He had never come upstairs before. Never. Something had changed. The next morning, Clara called Detective Chen and told her about the nighttime visit. The detective listened and then said, "I ran his name through our systems. Nothing came up. No criminal record, no outstanding warrants. But I also checked with the university. There's no record of anyone by that name ever being enrolled. So he's not a student. It doesn't appear so. We're trying to trace his real identity, but it's slow. The fake reference complicates things. He's been careful." Clara looked out her window. David's car was gone. He had left an hour ago and not returned. "What do I do?" she asked. "I think you should leave," Detective Chen said. "Go stay with a friend, a family member, somewhere he doesn't know about. We'll keep working on this." Clara thought about it. She had no family nearby. Her friends were scattered, most of them in other cities. But there was a woman from work, Ellen, who had offered once that Clara could stay with her if she ever needed to. She called Ellen, who said yes immediately. Clara packed a bag quickly. She was heading for the door when she heard a sound from the basement. David's car was still gone. He should not be there. She froze, listening. The sound came again. A scraping sound. Like something being moved. Against every instinct, Clara walked to the basement door and opened it. The stairs led down into darkness. She flipped the light switch. Nothing happened. The bulb had been unscrewed. She stood at the top of the stairs, her hand on the railing, trying to decide what to do. Then she heard it. A voice. Not David's. A woman's voice, faint and terrified. "Help me." Clara ran. She did not go down the stairs. She ran out the front door, down the porch steps, and into the street. She called 911 as she ran, her voice shaking, barely able to form words. "He has someone in the basement. I heard her. Please, hurry." She hid behind a neighbor's fence, watching the house, waiting. 5 minutes passed. 10. Then police cars arrived, lights flashing but sirens silent. Officers surrounded the house. Detective Chen arrived shortly after. Clara watched from a distance as they entered the basement. It seemed to take forever. Finally, Detective Chen walked toward her. Her face was pale. "We found her," she said. "A woman. She's alive. Dehydrated, frightened, but alive." Clara's legs gave way. She sank to the ground, tears streaming down her face. "David," she managed to ask. "Gone. He must have slipped out somehow. Probably when you ran. But we have his description, his car, his fake name. We'll find him." They did not find him that day. Or the next. But the woman in the basement survived. Her name was Anna. She had been missing for 2 weeks. David had taken her from a parking lot and kept her in a hidden room behind the storage area, a room Clara had never known existed. The police found evidence of other victims there too. Traces, photographs, notebooks. David had been using the basement as a holding place for years, moving women in and out, always careful, always unnoticed. Clara could not go back to the house. She sold it eventually, for far less than it was worth, to a developer who tore it down and built something new. She moved to another city, another state, and tried to forget. But sometimes, late at night, she still hears that voice. "Help me." And she knows that somewhere out there, David is still watching. Still waiting. Still adding to his notebooks. The police never found him. But Clara checks her locks every night anyway. Just in case.